my third years. I must introduce some people who are here with us today. You might have noticed them around. We have with us Ms. Varda Damre. She is the faculty in the Department of Marine Science at Goa University, and she is an alumnus of St. Xavier's College Microbiology Department, a good friend, a colleague, and a very warm person, open to helping you understand or answer any queries you may have. So we are pleased to have you with us, Dr. Varda.
I think you can just rise.
She is Dr. Sameer's better half, if I may say that. Thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to have you with us. We have with us an alumnus of our college as well, Ms. Natasha Barnes and Ms. Diksha Sargankar. I have got your vote, right? Yes, very much so. I take credit for all the good that's in there. Okay, thank you so much for being with us today. Let's get right back into this webinar and get it underway with our first session. We are honored to have with us Dr. Sameer Damre. He will initiate this month-long lecture series, and he brings to this initiative his expertise in bioinformatics and will be exploring an interdisciplinary concept between biology and computer science. In this century, it is essential that science collaborates, shares, and unitedly moves forward for the benefit of all. The session and what you take back home is only going to be as good or as much as you put into it. So I urge you to pay attention, have all your questions at hand, and we will have a very fruitful event with us. All right? I hand over the mic to Dr. Sameer. It's all yours.
Once again, I would like to thank your management and the staff for inviting me here for initiating this month-long international webinar series in the new perspectives in life sciences amidst COVID times. COVID has taught us a lot of good things, bad things. So forgetting about the bad things, let us take forward the good things what COVID has taught to look into different subjects with the different perspectives. So today I am going to talk about bioinformatics. I just spoke to your teachers yesterday. I was told you people do not have bioinformatics. So I'll try to speak at the basic level which you can understand and try to get you into bioinformatics bus, which is really going very fast. And COVID was the time when bioinformatics played a big role in getting the vaccines out in time. Without the sequencing and the bioinformatics, it would really not would have been possible to have the vaccine on time and to tackle this pandemic, which we have almost successfully done. So coming to the topic bioinformatics, it's interface between biology and computer science. So it's not a pure science as such. When you say pure science, you have this botany, zoology, all those things. It's an interface between biology, what we know, what we have been learning, and then the modern computers, the computer science, wherein you try to put in all your information or data which is collected by the biologist and then try to infer something out of it. So we will start with first basic. What is biology? You all are BSc students. So biology is nothing but it's a branch of science that deals with the living organisms. Anything living is what you are studying under the biology, and how they are living, what are the processes which are going on. So the vital processes, it encompasses diverse fields. As I said, it has a lot of pure sciences, botany, zoology, microbiology. It has applied sciences like biotechnology. Then you have specializations like evolution, conservation. You name any kind of thing wherein you have life that is being studied and taught under these subjects. But then there are, when you see this life biology, it is ranging right from the viruses, the COVID ones, up to the big dinosaurs which are no longer there. But to study all this, it's not really possible to look into the size part as such, because they are right from nanometers to the microns to millimeters to centimeters. The size variation is huge. But then how do we study that? That is where you start looking into inside the molecules which are being produced and what they are made up of, like your cells, the tissues, different kinds of organs. So because of this difficulty in studying the kind of life or how they have evolved, the scientists need to come out with the new techniques, and that is where the molecular biology or all the DNA, RNA, what we talk about and what we study come into the picture. And this is all done into, now you people have heard a lot about omics. This is what is big science, big biology going on everywhere, which is very, very data centric. In that there are three types when you talk about, it's genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and the fourth one is metabolomics, which is dependent on the first three. So I will talk during my talk about details about these terminologies what I have used here. To start with, when you say genomics, that's the one, the gene what is made up of. Then you have transcriptomics or the transcriptome, the mRNA. From that you go to the proteins, and then you have the metabolites which are being produced. So in short, if you have to say genome, it will predict what can happen. When you have transcriptome, what appears to be happening, it's a real time, what the changes are occurring in the cell. Then proteome, this is what are the molecules which are making it happen. And the metabolome gives us a brief idea about all these things, what has happened is happening. So we'll see during the talk about this in detail. Coming to the bioinformatics, when you talk about that, what are the building blocks of the bioinformatics? These are these three molecules what I said, DNA, RNA and protein. What do they do? You have the DNA sequence, you have the RNA structure, protein evolve into different kinds of molecules, that is your enzymes and other stuff. And then you have the pathways, like your Krebs cycles and TCA cycles, other stuff. The interactions between the different molecules. And then obviously the mutations which we are seeing, that's all the everyday news strains we keep on hearing. Today first XC strain was detected in Mumbai airport of the COVID. So that is all thanks to these mutations, what you see. So coming to the first building block, DNA. This you people must have studied right from your 11th, 12th standard in your BSc again. Going back to the basics, DNA is made up of 4 different types of bases. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, which has a pairing. A pairs to T and C pairs to G. And then that all is built up using a phosphate backbone. And you have the D stands for the deoxyribose, the sugar which makes its DNA. So this, what do we do with this? We can have simple sequence analysis, database searching, pairwise analysis, different kinds of regulatory regions like your black operon and other kinds of operons where you have the regulatory mechanisms in place, gene finding, so like the gene mapping, or when you try to find out the genes which are responsible for doing certain activities, whole genome annotations, that's your whole genome sequencing. Comparative genomics, when you are trying to compare between 2 different kinds of strains, it could be a bacterial or it could be other your pathogens and other stuff where you need to confirm that these are really pathogens. That is your comparative genomics. The next building block, that's your RNA. So the only difference is the sugar which is there and one of the bases. So you have your cytosine, guanine, adenine and uracil. So your T is replaced by uracil here, and then you have your ribose instead of a DF. Your RNA is there. So in this RNA, I will not go into these details, this is really not required at this level for you, but then these are responsible for different kind of splicings. The structure, the single gene analysis, the cloning when you are doing, you can make use of mRNA and you can go for cloning using reverse transcriptase. Experimental data involving thousands of genes simultaneously, where you are studying a given event at one point, how many genes are being expressed or what are the different mRNAs which are present into the cell, and that all is done using different kinds of automated devices like microarrays, expression array analysis, which may be in your third and the masters you will study about. And then the next one after DNA and RNA is the protein, which is actually making all the molecules which are there. So these are the functional blocks. Like DNA and RNA are the ones which are making, and proteins are the functional blocks which are responsible for carrying out the different reactions in the cell. So that is all encompassed in the proteome of an organism. That is your ensemble of all the proteins put together, which can be studied using 2D gels, mass spectrometer, then going to the 2D, 3D, 4D structures. So these are having different structures, like only when it is in this stage, quaternary structure, that is folded in one particular shape or size, the protein is functional. Whereas DNA and RNA, that is not the case. DNA and RNA are strands which are ultimately responsible for making these proteins, and the building blocks of proteins are the amino acids, which you must have studied in your graduation level studies. But then for many years together, the biologists were able to study all these molecules one at a time. It was really not possible to study all these in together. They could study only one or small number of objects like genes, mRNAs or proteins at a time. It was really not possible to study all the things put together and have a holistic view of the what are the different things happening in the cells. That is where you have your bioinformatics coming into picture. So bioinformatics is the one which takes into, I have taken this definition from Wikipedia. Bioinformatics is an interdisciplinary field that develops methods and software tools for understanding biological data. And in particular, when the data sets are large and complex. If you have something small, like a small gene of say 15 to 20 bases, you can do it with, like suppose you are designing a primer. You people know about PCR? Okay. So the primers which are used. So if you are designing a primer for a PCR, if it's a small primer, you can do it manually also. But the moment it's going to be big and it has to be a say universal primer, for example, 16S when we talk about, it's a gold standard for identification of any kind of bacteria. And these are universal primers which are available for their identification. So somebody has designed them for us, but suppose you want to design a primer. So that is where you need to take help of computer and softwares, because it is not possible for us to take like 100 different kinds of bacteria and then try to find out a region which will be commonly amplified using a single type of primer. So that is where you start making use of basic use of the computers. And that's what I meant, like when the data sets are large and complex. And it's an interdisciplinary field where you really need to know a bit of biology, chemistry, physics, computer science, information engineering, mathematics and statistics. Yeah, many people do not like maths, that's one of the reasons we come to biology. But then those days are gone where you could study in isolation one subject. If you really need to do well, you need to study different subjects and you cannot run away from anything. I personally did not like biochemistry when I was in my BSc and MSc, and now I am heading a proteomics lab and day in day out we are doing only biochemistry there. There is no option. So that is what your bioinformatics also, like you don't like maths and statistics and computers, so you come to biology. Ultimately when you are writing a paper with regards to ecology or diversity, you will be asked what is the statistics, different statistical tests, t-test and all, which we study in statistics. You have to make use of them in biology. That is where your mathematics starts and is finally then taken over by the computers, but then ultimately you need to run the computers. It will not do it on its own. So this was a term which was first coined by Pauline Hombach and Ben Hasper. Like bioinformatics, it's biology plus informatics. Going to a little bit of history of bioinformatics. This was the first collection of amino acids which are compiled together as an atlas of protein sequence and structure by National Biomedical Foundation. And this was done by a lady named Margaret Dayoff. And she is the one who we should give credit about all this different databases and all which we see together. She was the first to compile and took care, and she edited this for almost more than 30 to 40 years. And then it was taken on, like a small group was doing it. It started as a small time, and she was the first one to apply the evolving computational technologies for the biology and medicine in the form of the creation of the protein and nucleic acid databases, and which could be integrated together and then searched online using different softwares. Later on then EMDL, nucleotide sequence data library, was established in 1988, which is still being used as ENA today. This was done in 1980 at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, that's EMDL, in Heidelberg, Germany. And then coming to the most commonly used now, NCBI, which we use for everything, whether it be DNA or for the papers in the form of PubMed. So this was actually established in 1988 using a legislation which was passed in the Senate. So it's an official document even for the US government, which was passed in 1988, and now it is being maintained by the University of Bethesda, and it's, I mean, the only competitor to Google, I would say, is NCBI. They have huge information which is there in them, which everybody is making use of. So the aim, what is the aim of this bioinformatics? It's the data acquisition which is collected and using the different experiments which scientists or researchers are carried out across the world. Tool and database development. Ultimately, the information which is being developed, which is collected, has to be put in some tools which is accessible to everybody using some graphical user interfaces. Data analysis, whatever data has been collected has to be analyzed, and the integration. Ultimately, you need to get some conclusion out of the data, use data which you are collecting, creating, and then analyzing. So that data, what we are saying, it has to be stored and analyzed. So these are done in huge servers which are manned by these people. It's a very broad, interdisciplinary and ever-widening area. So these are some of the modern terminologies which are used, like systems biology. If you open any kind of this big journal these days, you will find system biology picking up big time, computational biology, health informatics. That is where during the COVID times, bioinformatics came into picture. But then there is nothing to get scared of with all these big terminologies. We all are bioinformaticians. We are collecting the data, we are using it, disseminating it. Even a simple Excel what you are using is nothing but a collection of data, the different formulas what you are putting through. But these are all the simple level. And then when you go towards more complex level, like the bioinformatics databases, searches, which I will talk in my next slides, its complex level is writing new programs and working with large data sets. So once you start learning, there is nothing difficult as such and nothing to get scared of. So this is all to make the life of the biologist easier. Because if you can do all these things through one click of a button, which somebody has done for you, it is always easy and faster. You can use your time for other more productive things. So the bioinformatics studies, they deal with the storage, manipulation and interpretation of the biological data. And this, when you say bioinformatics, is mostly to do with the DNA or the amino acids, let's say protein databases, because these are the most commonly used, the DNA, RNA and the protein databases which people are using world over. Then the rules and the systems that govern or affect the structure and the function. For example, when you are trying to create the 3D or 4D quaternary structures of proteins and all, there are different kinds of softwares available which then the evolution of various life comes from the computational approaches. When you talk about evolution, how the life has originated and how it has diversified and it has come to a stage like Homo sapiens where we are now, how it has gone through and what the changes the DNA has gone through. So these all are studied under all these bioinformatic different softwares. So this field has a big role to play in deciphering all the genomic, transcriptomic and the proteomic data which is generated by all the researchers across the world through the high throughput experimental techniques and organizing information gathered from traditional biology. So the traditional biology cannot be overlooked unless until you really know what is bacteria. You will not be able to get the DNA out of it and do the sequencing or the bioinformatics using that. So with the age of computers, we should not tend to go away from your basics also. So when I say about evolution of bioinformatics, this is what we have come across. Like 90s when the bioinformatics started and when computers were still at their infancy, we did not have all these supercomputers or large servers which we are using or the internet feeds. So these are basically a collection of the databases which people are doing at lab level. Like I said, give example of that lady. who was maintaining the amino acid databases. So like this, there were different labs which are having their own data collections which are there, and then they started putting them together. So basically initially it was just the primary database containing the large experimental sets in the genomics and proteomics, which they were trying to understand the functions and utilities of the individual genes. In one of my first few slides I said about they were trying to study one or more, this small number of molecules at a time. So this is what I meant, like few number of genes or proteins. They were trying to understand the functions and what roles they are playing. So bioinformatics now, where we are at now, 2022. So secondary databases containing accumulated biological knowledge. Now we have enough data which is collected with regards to the genes and proteins and their functions. But then now we need to know about how they are interacting and what is the outcome of that. So that is being understood at the functions and the utilities at the molecular, cellular and organism level. So we have graduated from the individual genes, proteins to the molecule, cell and the organism level. And the bioinformatics in future would be a complex computer representation of the cells and the organism, which is for understanding the basic principles of the higher complexity of the biological systems. There is a lot of discussion going about like using DNA as a data storage system. Like what DNA we have in us, it is having a huge memory and it cannot be destroyed as such unless until we die. So but then is it possible to store data, because then you don't need these big supercomputers or hard disks to store the data. And a lot of work is being done in systems biology where they are trying to use the DNA to store the data, and they are partially successful also into it. So maybe in another couple of decades we will be really seeing the DNA is being used, like cells being used to store the data. Now they are trying to put this DNA into the cells like bacterial cells wherein they can keep it and have the clones of that. That's at the next level. So, but then this is all at preliminary level. We really do not know much details about it. But if that happens, that will be really great for mankind, where we can have all the information stored in the live material, which cannot be destroyed so easily. So, for this field, there are different techniques which people are using world over. Sequence and structural alignment, database design and data mining. Like I said about the primer design, so this is something similar to that, database design, wherein you will have all the collections and you will be having graphical user interfaces to retrieve the information back from those databases. Macromolecular geometry, so the structure of the proteins, the functional structures or the due to mutations, what is the changes occurring. The phylogenetic tree construction, this is the basic thing to study the evolution and how the organisms have evolved and how they are connected to each other. Prediction of protein structure and function. Not all the times it is possible to get a protein out in functional state. So that is where the predictions come into picture. You have your DNA sequences and based on that you can predict what are the amino acids it's going to produce. And those amino acids have to be folded in a particular shape to be functional. That is what now you can do on computers, simulated computers, wherein you can look into the protein structure prediction and the functional sites which are present on different amino acids. Then the gene finding, like which are the genes responsible for particular, say, diseases. So that can be predicted now. Expression data clustering, wherein you have the genes which are there, they will be giving rise to the different kinds of mRNAs. So those different expression products which are there, they could be put together on the microarrays and they could be used for the faster detection of the, say, diseases, for example. Okay, when I was talking in the previous slide about this phylogenetic tree construction or the database design and data mining. So this is one example of data mining which I put together for especially the graduate students. I don't know whether you have heard of this BLAST tool. That is your basic local alignment search tool. When any DNA sequence you get, you need to identify that in a database. So most commonly used database is NCBI at present, wherein you copy your sequence into this BLAST tool and then you search. So it will search across the millions of sequences which are available in this database, and then it will give you one identification. Based on that, you will be able to identify what kind of gene that is. So that is called as a BLAST tool. Now these are different BLAST programs which are available. The first one is for the nucleotides, that's for the DNA, and the remaining 4 are for the proteins which are used. So BLAST-N and BLAST-P are the most commonly used for the DNA and the proteins. Based on that, then you can go for a phylogenetic tree construction. So I think this will be taught to them, right, in third year or no? They don't have that. Okay. Okay, phylogenetic tree is nothing but, tree is like you have a tree and then you have branches, and then each one is connected to say leaves or what. So here, like this is the example, this is your tree, this is a branch. So based on the distance between these branches, you can tell how different one organism is from another organism. Like for example, when you say rice and human genome, you have more than 70% of homology in the genome of rice and human. Coming to E. coli is also having more than 70%. But in spite of that, rice is a grain there, and we are human beings standing, talking and doing things here. So that gives us the distance. When you try to put our genes with rice genes, say for example, they will have a fixed distance and that will not be changed. So that is called as a evolutionary distance, where you will know how far you are connected from your ancestor and where exactly you diversified. I will show that in the next slides. This is what I meant. You have your origin of life. So this is the Big Bang, when Earth formed. Then you have the prokaryotes and eukaryotes coming into picture, and down into this is where we are. So just to give an analogy, if you divide the whole this thing into a say 30-day month, the origin of life happened during the days 3 and 4, that's initially. Your prokaryotes, eukaryotes and the protozoans come into picture. But then the abundant life form, what you see here, came only when around say day 27 or so. Then land animals appeared around day 28, mammals around day 29. Modern humans, which are named Homo sapiens in Bali, appeared in the last 10 minutes of the day. So that is where we are. And then if you go further down, we know only about the last 30 seconds of our history, what we are studying and what we are talking about or fighting about. So it's only the last 30 seconds last day wherein it is documented well. So this is our scale at present in front of all this origin of life and evolution. And this has, bioinformatics has helped us to understand where exactly the life originated and what is the difference between the DNA, because ultimately it is made of 4 bases, your A, T, C, G, and it is the arrangement of these bases which are giving rise to different kind of organisms, and the mutations in the change of base. Like suppose you have a fixed sequence which is there and that is changed, that is where you see like you have your Omicron, you have your Delta, and then all XYZ strains are there. So that is easily done there because it's just a 600 base sequence of that area, the coronavirus. It's not so easy when you see into the bigger organisms, because the change has to be done and it has to be sustained. That is most important. Unless until it is sustained, you will not get, like suppose the mutation is lost in the generation from F1 to F2, you will have, the organism will die away, it will not. Only if the mutation is successful, then only it will be carried forward to the next generation. These are the different applications for bioinformatics. This is just what I could think of, I put together. Microbial genome, molecular medicine, personalized medicine. This is a new concept which is starting. If you do your whole genome sequencing of yourself, you will know what are the possible diseases you might have in future. Based on that, you can start taking care of yourself. You can have your controlled diet, and so that is, and have the personalized medicines for that. That's the personalized medicine. Preventive medicine, gene therapy, drug development, bioweapons, insect resistance, climate change studies, antibiotic resistance, You name a field and bioinformatics would be having a role to play there, like development of drought resistant crop varieties. We have some places which are flooded with water, whereas some places which are really dry. So the scientists in different laboratories are trying to develop strains. Some have been already developed, wherein rice strains have been developed to grow into the highly saline soils, so that you can reclaim the soils and start doing farming agriculture. So these all things are possible with the gene cloning and the DNA sequencing, which is facilitated by the bioinformatics softwares and tools. And this is the most important tool which has revolutionized your bioinformatics and molecular biology, the PCR technique, which was invented by Gary Mullis in 1985. He was awarded for Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1993 for his pioneering work. And this is where the molecular biology and your bioinformatics started to go big time in all different fields. And in 2003 was the time when the first human genome was put out, and that time people are not so confident because the sequencing facilities, high throughput sequences are not available, still the Sanger sequencing was there. Then they went for the shotgun approach, wherein they cut down the DNA into small fragments and then they sequenced it and then they put together using the small computers which are available there. That time there were no high throughput softwares available, but then in spite of that, the sequence was finished ahead of time, and just last month there was still 4% gap which was left, and it has been completed. Now you can say that the complete 100% genome is annotated. All these years, we were said 2003, although the first draft genome came out, there were still some grey areas which were not sequenced and which were not annotated. More than sequenced, annotated. Annotated is like assigning a function to a particular gene. So sequencing is just like ATCG, whatever is there in that sequence. But annotation is very important. That is what takes time, because ultimately you have millions of base pairs which have to be put together. And what they did was they did a shotgun sequencing where they broke down into small fragments. Whereas now with the modern sequencing, you can just have a DNA strand passing through a sequencer, and then you will get, so you save a lot of time on the annotation and arrangement of those fragments. Previous slides I was talking a lot about these databases. So these are most commonly used databases by all the bioinformatician and molecular biologists. GeneBank and the UniProt are for biological sequence. Structure analysis, you have something called as a protein data bank where the functional structures are preserved. Then the protein families and motif finding, that's Cytopro, BFAM. Next generation sequencing, that is what at present everybody is doing for all kinds of studies, whether it be health or ecology, diversity. Then the network analysis, this is one of the most beautiful ones for doing all the metabolic reaction studies, KEGG, which is maintained by the Japanese. Then the functional networks, design and synthetic. So don't go into that big names, don't get worried about that. But these are some of the websites which are available for the databases. GeneBank, NSimple, PubMed is for the literature references, NR is for the non-redundant protein sequences, SwissProt again for protein. This is one dedicated for the genetic diseases called OMIM. Enzymes, then you have the protein structures and the KEGG for the metabolic pathways. That was all good about what was there and what people are using it, but what are the challenges which are faced in bioinformatics? The challenging issues that span all areas are basically with regards to the modeling systems. When you try to scale the relations and coupling, you are doing ultimately something in the lab and then you are trying to scale up. That is where you start getting the challenges. Temporal complexity and coding. Because ultimately the software which you are doing, you never know in the real life what is going to happen. Parameter estimation and treatment of uncertainty. Statistical analysis and data mining, this could be taken care of high throughput machines. Simulation modeling and prediction again, computers can take care of, but this is the most important, temporal complexity and coding and parameter estimation and treatment of uncertainty, which is giving a lot of challenges to all the bioinformaticians. Now coming to what we do in our lab at NIO, bioinformatics work. I am basically a microbiologist by my graduation, post-graduation, And I started doing bioinformatics only during my postdoc in Germany. I started with the protein work. So now whatever that we have learned, we have started implementing in our laboratories and making use of it in oceanographic studies. So this is the science and recording of describing the ocean's contents and processes, and that is where we are trying to put in the molecular biology. Oceanography has come a long way from this kind of microscopes to complex microscopes, and now we are trying to make use of the next generation sequencing to understand the processes which are happening in the oceans under the marine molecular biology. So here we are studying the molecular biology, microbiology and chemistry, which are responsible for the different kinds of nutrient cycling and what are the different kinds of organisms which are present and carrying out these functions. So this is just to give you an idea about how we have advanced. You must have studied the plate count anomaly in your graduation. So that is where all the diversity studies started using the culture-based techniques. Then came the DNA sequencing using the Sanger sequencing, wherein small fragments of 500 to 600 base length long we have studied. And then we are here now somewhere at high throughput sequencing, wherein you have something, this Illumina is there, which most of the people are using this platform. Illumina is a company where they have different sequences called HiSeq, MySeq or NextSeq, which are being used for generating huge amount of sequence data. And then as the sequencing things started improving, there were a lot of global campaigns which are launched by, like I just spoke about the whole genome, human genome, which was carried out in 2003. And after those sequencing was done, people started thinking what to do with the sequencing machines which are available. And that is where they started going into the other fields. And oceanography has really benefited from that, wherein they started collecting samples from all across the different oceans, and they started to look into the different kinds of organisms which are present into that. Unless until you really know what is present in that, you will not be able to understand how the things are happening. So first you need to understand what is there, and then you can see like what are the things which are happening, and that is where the sequencing techniques help. So this could be defined as the application of genomic sciences to understand the structure and function of the marine ecosystems. We have made use of this to understand the ecology of the oxygen minimum zones of the northern Indian Ocean. This you must have seen in the newspapers. Every year we see many times these fishes die on the coasts and all on the beaches. So that is because in the Arabian Sea there is a zone called an oxygen minimum zone. So that area is devoid of oxygen. And if the fishes get trapped in that area, they cannot go back to the ocean side. They start coming towards the beach, the coastal side. And if they get caught in that no oxygen, because they also ultimately need oxygen to breathe, dissolved oxygen, not the air, the dissolved oxygen which is present in the water, and that is where the fish kill starts happening, and that is increasing day by day because all the climate change scenarios what you are seeing. So we are trying to study the functional diversity of the microorganisms in these such oxygen zones, and I will not go into these. Yeah, these are some of the publications from our group, wherein we have studied the different kinds of organisms, as I said, into the oxygen depleted waters. Then some of the freshwater reservoirs, because they are facing a huge problem wherein you have this H2S, the producers, because of which many a times the dams are having problem of leakages, and it's really not possible. So, but if you need to know how it is happening, that is where we had studied around 9 to 10 dams in India. Then we have done some work with regards to the ITS, the fungal identification with the tar balls. You must be seeing in the newspaper that a lot of tar balls come every year on the beaches and all. And they don't just come, they bring along with them unknown organisms also associated with the tar balls. And then they can establish themselves into our ecosystem, because you never know from where the tar balls are coming into. And that is where they are dangerous, not good. They could be potential pathogens also. But the sequencing, what we do is we are outsourcing most of the things, because we do not have a sequencer as such in our laboratory. But then For protein, we have this machine called as a LC-MS QTOF. So we have an in-house proteomics sequencing facility wherein we are using this for understanding the different kinds of stress-related work, like the organism, what are the stress proteins they are producing. These are some of the, that's your teacher sitting here, Naveen. So she has also made use of this machine in our lab. And yeah, we have tried to study it, and now coming to the present thing, what we are, as I was saying you, the main thing what has really helped this bioinformatics or DNA sequencing is the cost which is coming down. If you see here initially, cost per raw megabase, 1 MB of DNA was somewhere close to $10,000, and now it is really come down big way. And this is the latest sequencing technique which has come out. It is called Minion with the cartoon name. And this is actually the sequencer, which is as small as this, what I am having in my hand. You can just attach it to the laptop, put 1 microliter of your DNA, and then half an hour to 45 minutes you have your DNA sequencer now. So that's the technology where we have come through from those big computers to small chips wherein you can do the DNA sequencing. We have this in our lab, we are just starting to use it. Hopefully we will be able to do, Natasha is the one who is at present handling it. That's our institute where I work. This is in Goa. We have regional centers in Bombay, Cochin, and one on the east coast at Vizag. And these are the different subjects which we deal with. It was started first initially, the NIO was started initially from physics and biology, somewhere in 60s, and then we are diversified to chemistry, geology, ocean engineering, marine archaeology, marine instrumentation. So it's not only for the science people, the basic science people, we also have a good engineering or instrumentation division where they are building up, at present one project is going on where they are building a robot which can do the automated data collection from the coral reefs. It's called Seabot. Because you cannot really access the corals, it's not good because the corals might break. So they are, the division is trying to build a Seabot robot which can do that for them. The oceanography, you really need to have ships. We are lucky to have 2 ships with us. These are our own vessels. This is Sindhu Sankalp, which is around 50 meters long, and this is RV Sindhu Sadhana, which is 80 meters long, and this is the one which we are using to sail and collect. At present, we are working with one CSR funded project, 120 crores plus, where we are trying to do the genome mapping of the Indian Ocean. For this time I was last year in Indian Ocean, where we started somewhere in Vizag, that's on the east coast of here, went up to Calcutta, then to the Andamans, went right down up to 30 degrees south, that's next to Australia, Australia is here somewhere. Came here, took a break at Mauritius for fuel and water. It was COVID time, so we were not allowed to go into the port, we were in the water only. And then we came back to Goa somewhere in June. So this is the longest oceanographic expedition in India's oceanographic studies, wherein we sailed continuously for 89 days. 26 of us were there. We were lucky to have good coverage through our national television, Doordarshan. So if you people are interested, you can just Google out TraceBio, and there are 2-hour documentaries there. You will have an idea exactly what is done in the laboratories on the ship, because we have a full-fledged lab on the ship. What I talked about DNA extraction, next cruise we are going to try the sequencing also on board. And the ultimate goal of this is, if you see here, this is the different metaproteome data available in different oceans. This area is absolutely blank, and that is what we are trying to fill in with the project what we are having at present in us, and 8 of my students are working on that. There are some protein portals available wherein mostly as Pacific and Atlantic Ocean data is there. Indian Ocean there is absolutely nothing. We have just started filling in with the genomic data. We have now covered this whole area with regards to the DNA work. That will soon come, the papers are under communication. And the protein work is just started. That is where we are trying to. This is my team who stayed with me for 89 days last year. then how you can be part of it if you are interested into it. Like you are at your TY now, and next year you will have to decide whether to go for your masters or what you need to do. If you, after your masters, you can have these national level eligibility exams like UGC, CSIR, NET, and then you can join an IO for your PhD. If you clear this, you get your own fellowship. That's quite attractive now. It's much more than the for pharmaceuticals pay for MSCs. The students get 31,000 for first 2 years and 35,000 in the next 3 years. So you get a well-paid fellowship for doing a PhD. Then we have 2 programs under DRF, that's you get a Goa University degree, and ACSI is our own degree now with CSIR gives at NIO. If you are not interested in PhD, you can join as project assistant also. Have a look out at our advertisements when they come, and that's all mostly after the master's. But then if some people want to see and take a break after BSc like 1 or 2 years, we have positions at project assistant 1 level also, wherein BScs also can join. Or you can come in for a project or summer training. Many times during pandemic now we have stopped, but we used to regularly get students from I think your colleges for summer training. So this year we have still not opened. We are just waiting now with this new strain coming out. I think we'll defer it. We won't start it this year. So check out our website for all these details. You can also visit NIO. 1st Jan is an open day for anybody to come and have a look at our labs. That's our foundation day. Coming to the career opportunities as bioinformaticians, there are several available. I have just put in some here. You could be, if you don't really like laboratory work, like some people don't like the wet labs, handling the pipettes and glass lab, you can be a scientific curator, a database programmer, bioinformatics software developer, computational biologist. There are many fields available. These are some of the good colleges and universities in India offering bioinformatics at postgraduate levels. JNU is really good Institute of Bioinformatics and Applied Biotechnology at Bangalore. And then these are some of the top colleges and universities abroad offering good doctoral courses. Then modern biological and medical research of development cannot be done without bioinformatics. It's really not possible. You cannot run away from the computers or mathematics. But then ultimately, biological thinking has to be done by you. Computers cannot do thinking for you. You will have to write the programs, then only the computers can run the programs. So human interface is required. It's not only the biology and when I meant biology, it's a human interface also, and the computer science. Coming to my last slide, what makes a good researcher? You need to be curious. If you are going to research about the world, what is happening around you, you should be patient. You will not get the results at one shot. Many failures will be there. You need to patiently analyze the failures and then go about it. Should be courageous enough to deal with the failures. Detail oriented. Whatever you do, you need to document properly. That's most important in science. Whether it's a positive result or negative result, result is a result. You need to write it down. Should be creative, persistent, communicative. If you just do your work and sit quietly without talking to anybody or communicating with your peers, you will not know what is happening. Communication is very important, be it in the form of casual discussions or like in our field, when you say communication, it's mainly the papers what we communicate out and give out what we are doing in our labs. Open-minded and free of bias. If you see like, okay, I should get this result only for this experiment, penicillin would never have been discovered. So you should be open-minded and free of any bias. With that, I would like to thank all of you. Thank you.
And we're open to questions. Is there anyone who has something that they would like to ask Dr. Sameer?
Sir, you spoke about those oxygen minimum zones in the Indian Ocean, and you spoke about how the fish, if they are trapped in that zone, they cannot go back to the ocean. Why is that? Is there a specific reason for it?
Going back in the sense, see, when they come towards the coast for breeding, most of the species, and that is the time when the oxygen minimum zones, it's a perennial zone, which is away from the coast at present. It will be somewhere around, say, we are at now 71, I guess, 71, 72 Goa. So that's somewhere around 68 or 69 degree east. And when the fishes have to go back, if there is a area which is devoid of any oxygen, they will not be able to survive in that. There are many who can cross and go, but then a big amount of fish get caught on the other side of this. And as the oxygen minimum zone expands, and during the peak of say August, September, then they start dying. That is where you see.
Thank you, sir.
Good day, sir. Sir, I had a question regarding the expedition in the Indian Ocean. So you said you had to collect a lot of genes and from basically from the organisms, right? So when you were collecting, the thing is, I guess you would also look at the more pressure depth kind of organisms. So what was your work like working with such specific organisms requiring specific conditions? Wouldn't it be very difficult to sort of get them from the ocean and also maintain them in the lab enough for you to sequence their DNA? So what was that like?
Yeah, we have both the approaches. We use both the approaches. One is culturable and one is uncultured. So in the culturable, what you are saying is right. You need to give them the conditions wherein the native conditions, what we call them. For example, if they are coming from 5,000 meters of depth, they will be exposed to a pressure of around 500 atmosphere. So for that, we have special pressure cultivation chambers in our laboratory. But my PhD is on deep sea fungi, wherein we managed to establish techniques to cultivate these special kind of organisms in the lab. But then when you are culturing them, it's not always possible to grow them because the conditions which they face, it is not only with regards to the pressure, but the nutrients which are present are also different. I can give you an example where instead of using a laboratory media, what we use like nutrient agar or the NP agar, if we use the extract, sediment extract from that particular region, the organisms grow better. Yeah, and it is more than the pressure, the temperature which is playing a big role for their growth. Because the temperature down there is around 4 degrees Celsius, which is like a huge refrigerator. And like cultures, when you put in refrigerator, the growth rates slow down a lot. So, when you try to give them the pressure and temperature, the growth rates are less. So the time for which we give them for incubation ranges sometimes from 3 to 6 months also. And after that, we come back to the lab and open. But then this is a very long and tedious process. And as I was talking during the talk, I said about a plate count anemone, where you can cultivate only the 5% of the cultures, 95% remain uncultured. But then they have a role to play. And how do we catch them? That is where your uncultured work comes into picture. And that is what we did in this expedition. We collected waters from different depths of the ocean, ranging from the surface to 5,000 meters. We filtered them through specialized filters, and then we did the DNA extraction directly of those filters. So that gave us the whole map of the DNA, what was available at that point, at that depth. That was for the water. Sediment also we did the same thing. We collected the sediment, we did the DNA extractions. Now it is under process of analysis. So we are going to do DNA, RNA and protein of that. And once that is done, we will have a rough idea of the area. You must have seen the track what I showed. That is encompassing most of the Indian Ocean, right up to the southern part of the Indian Ocean we went there. And then once we have an idea, then we will start going in the specialized zones. In this also, if you see our coming down from north to south, we had a track which was something called as a ridge in the oceans. Ridges are nothing but the mountains which are present. So whole track was on the 90-degree ridge. That is one of the major ridges which controls most of the nutrient flow which is coming from the Australian and Indonesian side. And then we went down up to 30 degrees, that is where the plates meet, the African, the Asian and the Australian plate. So that was the area where you have different habitats present. So these are some of the specialized areas we chose for.
So you spoke about storing the data in cells or DNA. So is it economical as compared to the current storage methods that we use?
Yeah, these current storage methods what we use are mostly like, say, suppose you have pen drive or a hard disk. That is based ultimately on a magnetic field which can be destroyed anytime. Whereas when you talk about DNA, it needs to be heat killed or something like that. It's not, it will not, like for example, if you see your laptops and all, the hard disk have particular life. That doesn't happen to the DNA. As long as it is kept in proper storage condition, it can be stored. That is the reason scientists are turning. And plus the place required for the storage is huge. For example, we have something like 2.7 billion data cells stored in our DNA. And it is at one cell also. So for example, E. coli, the size of that is around more than 7 MB. But it's such a small cell. So that's the reason scientists are turning towards it. It's still not fully successful, but hopefully it will be done. That will save us on the electricity and everything if it is done that way.
Alright. Thank you so much, sir. That was an amazing session. With that, we have come to an excellent beginning, I would say, because the first session usually sets the tone for the ones to follow. I am deeply grateful to Dr. Sameer. It's been a while since I have been engrossed in a talk, and with my students, I know how difficult it is to keep them engaged for 1 hour by dramatics, but Sir has been excellent. You've got a view into bioinformatics, and I've taken one life lesson from there that I should stop saying that I don't like math so much and make an effort to try more, because it's exactly as you say. We think that math is something we can keep aside. So, life lesson. Alright, thank you everyone for your attention. The vote of thanks has been proposed, which is why I will not do it again. We will all rise for the college anthem now, please.